Lobries and Gentlegrams, in today's episode of Jermaine in Gentleland, while the culturally cosplaying Canadian counterfeit Phony Montana got clobbered by Kung Fu Kenny, Pusha T, and Rihanna, the belligerent BBL balding bearded buffoon's buddy in the Big Three, Jermaine, justifiably jetted and jumped out of the juggernaut joust by saying sorry to the sharp sniping short-statured assassin for ever scheming to strike or even thinking of getting on the mic and trying to attack him, and while his apology garnered a rage-fueled reaction, it left the fans asking, will this leave J. Cole's career to crumble like scattered ashes, or with a clear comeback can Cole cool the chaos and conciliate his core fan base with compassion? And these are the questions we will be attacking. Because after apologizing and alienating Aubrey as the only opponent of the maniacal orthopedic feet whooper, J. Cole found himself in the toughest position he had ever been in throughout his entire career. The always positive, non-confrontational, calm, cool, and collected Cole had now found himself in a little bit of a kerfuffle where he reacted to a warning shot with unprecedented confrontation, criticizing the catalog of his peer within the self-proclaimed Big Three, and talked down on conceptual cultural masterpieces like To Pimp a Butterfly, or boundary-pushing vulnerable pieces of art like Mr. Morale, in order to prop himself up as the one who had truly bared the torch, the one who could truly warrant saying, F the Big Three, it's just Big Me. And with this newfound hunger and competitive spirit that has been bubbling up inside Cole's music for the last 4 or 5 years, it seemed apparent that he was truly ready to step up to the plate. And what you may not remember throughout this battle is at one point, it seemed like Cole was more ready to compete than both Drake and Kendrick. Kendrick set out that warning shot, but Cole was the first one with a full-fledged diss track on wax. Drake was still silent, but before his ghostwriters could even concoct a response, Cole was already on the biggest stage of his career at the Dreamville Festival in front of over 50,000 people, apologizing to Kendrick, claiming that his diss record wasn't aligned with his true path and he hadn't been sleeping right, knowing the energy that he put in it.
How many people think Kendrick Lamar is one of the greatest to ever touch microphone? Dreamville, y'all love Kendrick Lamar, correct? As do I. So I just want to come up here and be like, that was the lamest, goofiest shit. And it made me feel like 10 years ago when I was moving incorrectly. And I pray that God align me back up on my purpose and on my path. You know what I mean? I pray that Kendrick really didn't feel no way. And if he did, my chin out. Take your best shot. I'm gonna take that in the chin, boy. Do what you do. It's love. I pray that y'all are like, forgive the misstep, and then I can get back to my true path. Cause I ain't gonna lie to y'all. The past 2 days felt terrible. It let me know how good I've been sleeping for the past 10 years.
To most, this was a shameful move, disrespecting the competitive essence of hip-hop, the very same genre that both him and Kendrick studied together early on in their careers. But others, and don't kill me now, including myself, deemed this as not only a respectable sign of humanity, but also of authenticity, remaining consistent to the Cole that we heard on every project before 2018. And pay attention to that date because it's going to play an important role in this video later on. And it showed that J. Cole was willing to suffer the blow in order to control his own narrative and define what his greatness truly meant to him. It didn't stem from competitive rivalry, who could brutally bear the burden of the biggest and most brash bars. It was about staying true to who he was, telling his story in the most authentic way possible, and inspiring his fan base to maintain that same creative freedom. And this would all be great, but you gotta remember how Cole was talking since 2018. We're gonna break down the entire evolution of J. Cole the artist and his constant battle with gaining not only acceptance within the culture, but also solidifying his spot as the greatest within it, while simultaneously not stepping out of his comfort zone or his moral boundaries. But for a while, it felt like Cole transitioned from that humble college kid just trying to find peace in the world and navigate stardom after going from dorm rooms to diamond albums. It seemed by 2018 he grew comfortable in his own shoes, no longer seeking validation, no longer expressing that confusion that we heard from him earlier on in his career. At this point, at every chance he could get, Cole was letting the world know he was the greatest. He was in his peak form. Though with Cole playing his cards the way he played them throughout this battle, to a lot of people it kind of removed him from that conversation, right? How are you gonna say you're the greatest, but when someone debates it, you tie up your laces and run away from the races? Cole just released a song the other day. It's called Clouds. It's great. We're gonna break the whole thing down, along with how Cole got himself to this position, but justifiably a lot of the bars on this record piss some people off, especially when he's rapping. Bars like, the second you turn that keyhole, then heat blows, your weak flows out the water. I work smarter and harder, my style got a restraining order, don't bother, I charter unseen territories in order to push it farther than you guys ever thought of. I caught a lot of murder charges, turn artists to martyrs. How you gonna gonna rap, the planet will shake when I'm performing tectonic plates from a place where tech's on their waist, so stay safe or get left with chest on your face. As death waits for your last of breath, I'ma pass the test, yes, I'm a master chef. He's talking about all this happening when he's on stage, but the last time he was on a stage, he told the whole crowd that the first real competitive threat he was faced with left him sleepless and more confused than he was 10 years ago, and he had to retract himself from this battle. So is this hypocrisy, delusion, or is this greatness that Cole speaks of himself as still truly justified? Well, let's break it down to a T, but first, Lawbreeze and Gentlegrams, I got tons of great messages from you guys that this helped you out massively, so I want to put the rest of you on to something that almost seems too good to be true, alright? Let me give you a little glimpse into my life. When I'm not making this content for you guys, I have a disgusting addiction to my phone. My daily screen time is higher than Drake on that album cover, higher than Snoop off the edibles. So if you guys suffer that same addiction as me, I want to put you onto something that's going to change your life. FreeCash.com is a program that partners with mobile games that are looking for more users to play their games, and they will literally pay you to play their games for free. All you got to do is sign up using the QR code you see on the screen or using the link in the description of this video. You make an account super easy. All you got to do is put in your email, create a password, verify your email, and then you're good to go. And they got a bunch of games. My favorite is the Monopoly Go because we're always on the go trying to make some money. Once you make an account, you just click the game you want to play, follow the directions that they give you. The directions are super easy. Usually you just got to download the game and start playing. So it's about time you put that phone addiction to good use. Again, use the QR code you see on the screen or the link in my description. Create an account and you could start making more than $150 just to play a game on your phone. But yeah, it's not just the fans that have been grilling Cole, it's the rappers too. After this new song he dropped, Freddie Gibbs got on Instagram and said, people be rapping about how they kill rappers and they kill their careers and blah blah blah, but be backing out of rap beefs. Joey Badman, who has been getting attacked by the entire West Coast, deflected the energy onto J. Cole, the easiest of targets, paying homage to his ironically titled 2024 release Might Delete Later, rapping might delete later, but Joey won't. But I do think if Drake taught us anything, it's that no matter how bad you get destroyed in a rap beef, you can still make a comeback on the charts. But if there's one thing Kendrick taught us, like he rapped on the Super Bowl, they tried to rig the game, but you can't fake influence. You can't fake how the people will view your legacy when this is all said and done. And that's a battle Cole has always seemed to suffer. He's always tried to be a people pleaser while simultaneously doing his best to stay true to himself. That's where that apology stemmed from. That's why, in a way, part of me respected it, part of me definitely didn't, but I said one thing, and let me know in the comments if you guys feel the same, in that Cole can no longer try to make us believe that he's this big bad boogeyman, that he's the top of the food chain, cream of the crop, will destroy any rapper, neck on the noose as he put it. He's always valued authenticity. None of those bars going forward seem authentic. But Cole has had this crossroads for a while now, right? Let's take it way back to 2010. A simpler time, the beginning of the blog era. You had these juggernauts within hip-hop, the former Big Three, or I should say Big Four. Lil Wayne, who had just signed his proteges, Drake and Nicki Minaj, to Young Money. You had Kanye West, who had signed a hungry Big Sean to Good Music. You had Rick Ross at the top of his game, starting Maybach Music, signing artists like Meek Mill, who was crashing mixtape sites like DatPiff and giving us classics like the Dreams and Nightmares intro, or Wale, who gave us these critically acclaimed conscious projects balancing the introspection with the hits. And all of these guys had mainstream careers that took off a good year or two before Jay-Z's newest protege, J. Cole, could find his footing in this new era, cultivate a large enough fan base to get the green light from Roc Nation to kickstart his career and drop his major label debut. And on a side note, I see all you guys in the comments asking why I say debut as debut. I want to chalk it up to me simply being Canadian, but I think it's more so the fact that I'm simply cooked. I don't know. But anyways, this debut that Cole was about to release, he had very high hopes for from the beginning. He always wanted to be the greatest. How he talks today is how he always envisioned himself way back in the beginning of the 2010s. He wanted his first album to be that unanimous classic. His own version of The College Dropout, which he spent many of his college years studying, or his own Reasonable Doubt, like his mentor, or an Illmatic, something in that vein. And he just saw his greatest competitor at the time, Drake, drop what many would consider to be Drake's own classic project with So Far Gone. And Drake really changed the mixtape game with that project. That was, I think, the first mixtape to ever actually go gold, hit the top of the charts, generate multiple top 10 hits. This was unheard of not only for a mixtape, but also for a freshman. And Cole was always pinned up against Drake. That was the highest standard of what Cole could strive to be at that point in time. Creating projects that were well respected amongst the culture, pushing boundaries, leaving an impact and influence on the game, but most importantly, to J. Cole's mentor Jay-Z, bringing the hits. See, this wasn't the streaming era, right? In order to get a major label album release, you needed songs on the radio. You needed a buzz that was quantifiable for the executives to think it was worth the investment in printing thousands of copies of your album and shipping them out to a bunch of retail stores. Labels didn't understand the internet. They didn't understand you can cultivate your own core fan base through the blogs, through the DatPiffs. Or at least they didn't know that audience could translate into real album sales. And nowadays, while it might cost nothing to press a button and have your project all across different streaming platforms, back then it costed money for these labels to, make copies of your albums, ship them out to these stores, promote you on the radio, promote you on these TV programs. I say all that to say, Jay-Z being the businessman that he is and signing J. Cole, yes, he signed him because he saw the potential in him as an artist, but for Jay-Z to see a return on his investment, the traditional way back then was, get a hit song, put it all over radio. People will discover you through that. It'll build your buzz, which will then make it worth it for us to actually drop your album in stores. And Cole struggled with that because, again, he wasn't fixated on the hits. He was fixated on having that unanimous classic debut album. He wanted to remain authentic to himself. And with the really strong efforts he brought forth with projects like Friday Night Lights or The Warm Up, people had pinned him and Drake as the next two runner-ups to be the leaders of the new school. People were always gassing Cole up in interviews, comparing him to Drake.
I think Drake is a talented dude, but I feel like he's overrated. Why do you think his buzz is so big, yet cats like you, who I feel are like more talented than him, still ain't got that shine yet?
I can't co-sign none of that, but it's just how things happen, man. His stars lined up. It was supposed to happen like that for him. Fans shouldn't get mad at that. Like, this was destined for him. Like, my buzz isn't that big because it's not supposed to be that big. I'm not supposed to come in the game like that. That's not my path.
And Jay-Z himself used Drake as a benchmark for where he wanted Cole to be. He wanted Cole to release these phenomenal projects, but simultaneously have the hits to back up the catalog. Drake's mentor Wayne was saying, we're gonna be alright if we put Drake on every hook. What could Jay-Z say about J. Cole? Well, he did say something to Drake in front of J. Cole at an after party for the All-Star Weekend when Cole and Drake were chopping it up, and Jay came to both of them, looked at Drake and said, can you give the boy a hit? And I can't imagine how embarrassing this was for Cole, right? And he expressed this in his audio series, which we'll touch on shortly in this video. But yeah, in that audio series where he details his come up, he talks about how this was a pivotal moment in his career. He wanted to prove to Jay, to prove to the world that he could, make this big splash, big entrance to the game with a classic debut album. He's producing all of his records. Jay's telling him that maybe his production skills aren't up to par to deliver the type of quality hits that he needs to progress his career. Meanwhile, all his peers are lapping him. Wiz Khalifa, without a major label album, has a #1 song on the Billboard charts with Black and Yellow. Big Sean just released his first album, had multiple hits on that. Wale was kind of finding his footing, but he also had hits before Cole did. Drake was already pretty much Drake, so that just left J. Cole to still kind of prove to the world who he was. So how do you think the guy felt when his not only boss, not only mentor, but an artist who he looked up to, who he wanted to frame his career after, having his own reasonable doubt, Jay-Z, is reasonably doubting Cole's skills as not an MC necessarily, but as a superstar or having the potential to be a superstar, and as a result is shamingly asking who Cole considers to be a peer in Drake to toss Cole a sympathy hit the way you might toss your dog some scraps off the dinner table as they beg for food. It wasn't a good look, and it was the start to a long pattern of Cole feeling like he needed to prove his greatness to the people around him and above him. But this only truly worked in Cole's favor when he created in a space or through a lens that felt authentic to him. Jay-Z tried to link him up with all these pop producers or the producers of Wiz Khalifa's hit Black and Yellow. All that did was leave J. Cole more uninspired, more insecure in his own talents, and it left him with a collection of tacky tracks that screamed, play this on 2010's radio stations. And Cole explains on his audio series that looking back, it wasn't until he was out of those big Hollywood studios with those pop producers by himself listening to an album that started most of this journey with The College Dropout. He heard a sample on that new workout plan, flipped it, and that gave Cole his first hit, Workout. And even that wasn't enough to win Jay-Z over initially, as he later admitted to Cole that he didn't have much faith in the record, but it was enough to get Cole by, get him on the radio, and get that first album release date. When that came around, the label told him that he was only expected to sell around 60 to 70,000 copies in the first week, which would have been a lot lower than his peers. He ended up far exceeding that, selling over 220,000 copies in the first week with his first album. My point is, Cole has often played the underdog in many situations, often tried to please everybody, please the whole crowd, but it was really only staying authentic to himself that won his fans over and got him to that next level. We'd see those people-pleasing tendencies re-emerge on his second album as he devoted an entire song to apologizing to another one of his mentors, Nas, for quote-unquote letting him down by compromising his sound and producing a radio-tailored hit like Workout. And think about the dichotomy of that, right? He's trying to people please Nas for people pleasing Jay-Z. And he would kind of struggle with this balance of chasing greatness through what felt authentic to him while also trying to battle, mainstream industry standards. His debut album wasn't the classic that he hoped for. Less than a year later, Kendrick Lamar, someone who blew up long after Cole, did everything Cole had hoped to do, dropping a debut album with the cultural impact, the critical acclaim, and the hits that Cole wanted, all while refusing to compromise his sound. Don't Kill My Vibe, Backseat Freestyle, Swimming Pools, these were all well-performing songs on radio, but they weren't made for radio. There was a deeper message behind them. They all fit the narrative of Good Kid, Mad City. And he didn't have to apologize to Nas for anything that he did. And I think it took Kendrick's come up for Cole to see that, again, if you want to play the game properly, you can't fake influence. You got to do what comes natural to you. So he went back to the basics. He went back to doing what he did earlier on in his career where there was no pressure from the label. He was able to cook up what he felt like making, projects like Friday Night Lights. He went back to creating in a similar atmosphere and headspace. He removed himself from social media. He started visiting comedy clubs, meditating, being out in nature more, ditching the Hollywood studios, producing all of his own records, no features, doing what felt organic to him. And when it came to his third album, which many consider to be Cole's classic, 2014 Forest Hills Drive, he refused to go into that with any radio hits. That album was released without any major single, and he showed and proved that when he played to his strengths, he saw the best results. That was his most successful album, his most impactful album, his most critically acclaimed album. And so that's what I kind of meant in terms of the part of me that somewhat respected his decision to back out of the beef, right? It wasn't something that was authentic to him. He was creating from a headspace of, okay, I need to please the crowd. I need to please the audience that is thirsty for a response from me. It was the 2024 version of Cole compromising his sound to please Jay-Z and the labels and get that radio hit. This time around, he was trying to please the world by responding to an attack against his credibility, against his greatness. But anyways, in the meantime, between 2024 and the beef and 2014 Forest Hills Drive, there's a reason why when Cole did make that apology, he said he felt like engaging in that beef brought him back to how he felt 10 years ago, to where he wasn't moving on a path that felt right to him. 2014 was where he found that footing. And while he didn't feel, confident enough to go at Kendrick and attack anything Kendrick stood for, anything from Kendrick's catalog or his legacy, along the way between 2014 and 2024, there were several instances of Cole sticking his chest out, standing up for what he believed in, and kind of attacking some of his peers along the way. In 2016, leading up to Cole's first concept album with For Your Eyes Only, he dropped two songs, False Prophets and Everybody Dies. And while his bars today about killing your favorite rapper are quite vague, they were quite specific here. On Everybody Dies, he had smoke for everyone, saying, clap at the fake deep rappers, the OG gatekeep rappers, the would you take a break please rappers, bunch of words ain't saying nothing, I hate these rappers, especially the amateur 8-week rappers, Lil whatever, just another short bus rapper, fake drug dealer turned tour bus rappers, Napoleon complex, you this tall rappers, get exposed standing next to this 6'4" rapper, the streets don't F with you, you pitchfork rappers, chosen by the white man, you hit store rappers. And here he's going at the critics like Pitchfork, who Cole would later reveal never truly embraced him, like a Kendrick, like a Big Crit, like a Joey Badass. Here he's emphasizing he's no longer chasing that validation, also going after the new wave at the time of these SoundCloud rappers who rapped about dealing and using drugs, covered their face in tattoos, had colorful dreads, as he put them, the amateur 8-week rappers. He went from, apologizing to the OGs to now talking about clapping at the OG gatekeep rappers. The smoke for those OG rappers got even more intense on his subsequent release, False Prophets, specifically taking aim at Kanye and the downward trajectory he was headed on at the time, rapping a lot of what would come to age very well, especially in 2025, with bars like, ego in charge of every move, he's a star and we can't look away due to the days that he caught our hearts, he's falling apart but we deny it, justifying the half-baked stuff he drops, we always buy it, when he tells us he's a genius, but it's clear lately it's been hard for him to look up in the mirror lately. There was a time when that guy was my hero, maybe. That's why his fall from grace is hard to take, because I believed him when he said his stuff was pure and the type of guy who swears he's real, but everyone around him is fake. The women, the D-writers, you know, the yes men. Again, I say all this to emphasize it seemed like Cole had a really good grasp on the direction he wanted to take his career. He was fully playing to his strengths, embracing who he was, not compromising for anyone, even exposing the darker side of the industry that once had him, you know, compromising and confused and lacking confidence. At this point, he's more confident than ever and has this clarity where he isn't only giving us perspective into his growth as an artist and a human, but also painting a very clear picture of the pitfalls that this industry can have or has had on some of his former idols. He's not looking to them for the acknowledgement or the approval anymore. Instead, he's the one giving them clarity and advice. He did the same to his peer Wale on the next verse of this record, or 2 years later on his song 1985, when he again clearly prophesizes the downfall of a rapper like Lil Pump's career, advising him to save up his money and invest in assets instead of, you know, jewelry, cars, etc., emphasizing the importance of artistry over trolling, because all that trolling will just lead to your album flopping and you inevitably having to resort to doing reality shows like Love and Hip Hop. Even on his 2018 collab with 21 Savage, Cole predicted a lot of issues we'd see going on today, rapping bars like how many faking their streams, getting their plays from machines. I could see behind the smoke and mirrors, people ain't really real as they seem. Some of them are making millions, others are making memes. So yeah, it seemed like when Cole stopped the people pleasing, stopped trying to conform to industry standards, that's when he started moving with this sense of clarity, this sense of confidence that really took him to this next level in 2018 especially. That's when he settled into this more mature role within the culture. He was more respected than ever. He went on this insane feature run for like damn near 5 years, from 2018 to 2023. In my opinion, easily top 5 greatest feature runs we've ever seen in hip-hop, possibly second to Lil Wayne. Let me know in the comments who you guys think have had the greatest feature run in hip-hop. And, you know, all the while, the two guys he's running up against who inspired him in many different ways early on in his career, with Drake emphasizing to him the importance of commercial impact, and Kendrick, who came after him, emphasizing the importance of cultural impact, integrity, authenticity, and refusal of compromising your sound. Then you get to, you know, the new decade, 2020s, and this is where that big three conversation gets amplified. You had Drake selling the most records, you had Kendrick putting out the most innovative, groundbreaking bodies of work, and then you got J. Cole, who, in my opinion, really started approaching the craft like a sport. He emphasized after the success he saw in 2014 with Forest Hills Drive that he kind of got a little comfortable and found himself lacking inspiration. That's where the title of his long-awaited album, The Fall Off, was inspired from, that minor creative slump, and he used that as fuel to constantly try to sharpen his pen. He started giving us concept albums like For Your Eyes Only and KOD. He killed off the platinum with no features meme and started doing more features than ever, sharpening his pen with every verse that he bodied. But, you know, that whole battle with Kendrick and Drake and J. Cole temporarily, it was kind of a battle for the crown, right? A battle for greatness. A battle for who could be the undeniable best rapper alive. And again, Drake had the charts, Kendrick had the critics. What did J. Cole have? Where did his greatness derive from? I think that's why we were getting bombarded with so many bars from Cole talking about how he was the greatest, right? Because to quote another J. Cole song, he kind of felt like that middle child who was stuck between a Drake and a Kendrick, repeating that long cycle in his career of trying to find his footing and establish his greatness amongst his peers and amongst the artists who came before him. And he reflected on where he kind of stood, you know, amongst the big three, and just where his legacy and where his greatness lied in general on his 2021 song Heaven's EP, where he rapped, I said to myself, whatever you do, you won't do it partially. From this day forward, I move with a new ferocity, a fail-proof philosophy. Success is in the effort, so if a guy tried his hardest, I'm at peace knowing God ain't deal it in his group of cards for me. Some people say that I'm running third. They threw the bronze at me, behind Drake and K-Dot. Yeah, those guys are superstars to me. Maybe deep down, I'm afraid of my own luminosity, so that's why when you see me on red carpets, I'm moving awkwardly. So again, emphasizing that his greatness lies in the fact that he's, you know, always trying to improve. He's okay with, you know, God dealing it in his cards that maybe the people threw the bronze at him because he knows he fought his hardest to achieve his own greatness. And he professes that later in the song, saying, "The tale's official, the best guy breathing, it just failed to hit you. You couldn't tell because you fell for the bells and whistles, and that's an area where I don't excel." And these bars kind of predict a lot of what we'd see from J. Cole later on in his career, because again, his greatness, or his lack thereof, was defined by the fact that he opted out of this battle for the throne. To him, that's just bells and whistles. That's just a superficial way of measuring what makes an artist great. The audience was so, enthralled by this battle that it was no longer about, what makes Kendrick great, what makes Drake great. It was about, who can clobber their opponent the most. At least this is how J. Cole looked at it, right? On this record, rapping, "I'm the best, it just failed to hit you because you're too busy looking at the bells and whistles," which would be the equivalent to, like I mentioned before, Cole maybe not having the critical praise that Kendrick had, or the commercial success that Drake had. These are the bells and whistles. These are what Cole is emphasizing doesn't make you great, and he emphasized this on his response record to the whole beef, Port Antonio, rapping, "Jermaine is no king if it means I gotta dig up dirt and pay the whole team of algorithm bots just to sway the whole thing on social media, competing for your favorable memes to be considered best or live in rest, the weight of both things. I understand the thirst of being first that made them both swing, protecting legacies so lines get crossed, perhaps regrettably." There's a lot of foreshadowing and emphasis on the fact that J. Cole's greatness to him doesn't stem from the bells and whistles. It doesn't stem from winning battles, swaying social media opinions. That doesn't make Jermaine no king. His passion and his skill set does. But there is this sense of hypocrisy there, right? And J. Cole, again, being at this crossroads between remaining authentic and letting that authenticity define his greatness, not giving in to the social media wars and the bells and whistles, disregarding the pitchfork critics and the record labels thirsty for a hit. But then at the same time, there's also that competitive drive within him and this deep desire to be the best, this disdain he has for the public throwing the bronze at him. And for that, we get this overcompensation of two things. One, him always getting on record talking about murdering your favorite rapper, vaguely, never throwing specific shots, always talking about being the greatest, but when push comes to shove, still going back to people pleasing and compromising to a certain extent by being the first one to kick off this massive rap battle and then apologizing for it 6 days later when, coincidentally, the public sentiment of that diss record was not the most positive. You can't help but think he only partook in the battle in the first place to please the crowd. And he only opted out of the battle, possibly for his own sanity, but definitely also to not burn any bridges. Again, to people please. He emphasized it on Port Antonio. "My friends went to war, I walked away with all their blood on me." Still emphasizing his spot in that top position, rapping, "I wouldn't have lost a battle, I would have lost a bro." So it's like, what compromise are you trying to make? Because to be the greatest, yes, you got to remain authentic. No, you can't just be crowd pleasing, but you also got to take risks. You also got to step out of your comfort zone. And I don't think we saw Cole do this better than on Johnny P's Caddy. This was a 2022 song with Benny the Butcher. Again, another instance of Cole hopping on a feature and basically claiming the whole song. And this to me really emphasized the pinnacle of Cole's confidence, really making the statement that he was hip-hop savior, rapping, "The real ones here, the young boy that walk with lines around the outlines of chalk where the corpse is lying. Of course, I'm trying to revive a sport that's dying, but the guns and the drug bars that y'all rely on got these nerds thinking that you guys are as hard as I am, but that just means I ain't as comfortable as y'all with lying. Stretching the truth, no, I never stress in the booth, they feel the pressure, me, I felt like I just left the masseuse. Effortless, how I'm skating on these records is proof I put your favorite rapper's neck in a noose, never letting him loose." Again, emphasizing the authenticity in his bars. He's not comfortable as you guys are with lying, but it's effortless to him. He's saving hip-hop, reviving a sport that's dying, and without trying, he's putting your favorite rapper's neck in a noose. And to this point, all these bars were completely believable. This was 2022. Remember where we were back then for a second. Remember that Cole rapped, he was trying to revive a sport that's dying. At the same time, Kendrick Lamar was coming off a 5-year hiatus, while J. Cole was on a 5-year feature run, with his skill set being at the peak that it's ever been. And Kendrick doesn't return rapping with that same braggadocious ruthlessness and confidence that J. Cole had. Instead, he gave us Mr. Morale, where he's stripping back the layers of his ego, letting the world know that he's not the savior of hip-hop, and he's choosing himself. He's choosing to save himself. He's not choosing to revive a sport that's dying, as J. Cole said. He was finding himself. He was working on himself. He was nowhere near as confident as he was with Damn. And ironically, on J. Cole's diss track, 7 Minute Drill, he rapped, "Damn was your classic, that was your prime, I was trailing right behind, I just now hit mine." And he was exuding this confidence on everything. It wasn't just the bars, it wasn't just the feature run, it was the presentation of everything. The off-season, his 2021 album, was arguably the most confident Cole had ever sounded. And he was the most concise in his messaging. He was giving us everything fans ever wanted from him. Strong full-length projects. Arguably the best roster in the entirety of hip-hop with the Dreamville Collective. The best feature verses. He was washing every rapper. Giving us some of his biggest hits with Middle Child, A Lot, Amiri, The London, My Life. Some of his greatest rapping performances and his most self-reflective records like The Climbback, Hunger on the Hillside, his most hard-hitting records like 95 South, and then this feature run that he's been on since what he would deem Kendrick's prime in 2017 reaches its peak in late 2023 when he gets on this Lil Yachty song called The Secret Recipe, and then back-to-back a month later gets on Drake's song First Person Shooter. Ironically, on both these songs, he's talking about people putting him into these fake manufactured beefs. First Person Shooter rapping, they're so thirsty to put me in beefs, dissecting the lyrics, sucking their teeth. He's laughing at it because he loves the mystique, but at the same time, he's talking about who's the big three? Is it Aubrey, me, Kendrick? It's like we started a league, but right now I feel like Muhammad Ali. I feel like the one, the greatest. Kendrick, in 2017, you hit your prime. I was trailing behind. I just now hit mine. And as far as Drake, I mean, as Kendrick put it, they were hugging and kissing on stage. Drake was literally admitting on stage as they would perform First Person Shooter that J. Cole had the verse of the year and that he washed Drake on that record. Kendrick gives us an album that is not for the faint of heart, very hard to sit with. Meanwhile, Cole is giving us anything you could want as a hip-hop fan. Excellent performances, great projects, hits, high-level rapping. And while Kendrick is relatively silent, J. Cole is on this massive tear, more confident and more active than ever. And while he might not be as, acclaimed as Kendrick or as big as Drake, it was finally that passion that Cole was talking about, not the bells and whistles, that got him to this position where you could make the strong case that Cole, at the end of 2023, was the best mainstream rapper alive. And I think that's why Kendrick made direct reference to J. Cole's bars on First Person Shooter, not Drake, J. Cole's, by saying, F the big three, it's just big me. Drake didn't make reference to big three, it was J. Cole who did. I think this was Kendrick directly saying to Cole, you're talking about reviving a sport that's dying. Let's see what happens when all that talk actually gets put to the test. And it's interesting, right? Because obviously we already touched on how the battle went. We'll shortly touch on J. Cole's attempt at a comeback and him really playing to his strengths. But I want to touch on for a second J. Cole's infatuation with reviving a sport that's dying. In J. Cole's prime, that's what he claimed to be doing. Kendrick comes back a year later and shows us how to hit the culture, the charts, and the critics on levels we've never seen before. Not like us breaking all these streaming and Billboard records, getting 5 Grammys, winning the critics and the charts, and obviously the culture, with revolutionary moments like the Super Bowl performance, the pop-out performance, uniting his region at the Not Like Us music video on the GNX album, which then went #1 again, breaking more records, having 4 #1 singles in the span of 12 months. And Billboard published this article saying hip-hop/rap reigned as the most common primary genre in the Hot 100's top 10 throughout 2024, contributing to 38% of all top 10 hits and bounding from a 23% take in 2023. Hip-hop was the only primary genre that increased in prominence when compared to 2023. This is largely due to the success of artists who appeared on 3 or more of the year's hip-hop/rap top 10s. Kendrick Lamar with 8 of them, 8 top 10 records in 2024. Tyler, the Creator, and Future and Metro Boomin as well. You don't see J. Cole on that list. And it was thanks to those artists, primarily Kendrick, who had the largest percentage of top 10 hits, of hit records on the Billboard charts, that blasted hip-hop back to being the most consumed genre in music. J. Cole talked about reviving a sport that's dying, and while again, you can make the argument that at one point, in around 2022, 2023, he was the biggest and best mainstream rapper alive, his greatness wasn't enough to command this type of impact that Kendrick later had in 2024. Like he said again, you can try to rig the game, but you can't fake influence. And I think the way everything ensued with the battle put some things into perspective for J. Cole, right? Again, he said he was moving on the right path for the last 10 years. He felt like this battle was a slip up and had him moving like he was moving 10 years ago when he was still at that big crossroads between trying to please everyone to justify his greatness while also remaining authentic to push his artistry forward. Jumping in this battle was another move yet again at trying to please the crowd. Why I somewhat commend his move on backing out of the beef was because it was a strong statement in remaining authentic to who he is. And he remained on that path throughout the rest of the year. People forget that J. Cole started 2024 off very similarly to how he started 2025 off. Both years, he was teasing new music and sounded hungry. 2024, he then gave us Might Delete Later, stumbled off his path, literally deleted it later, and then started focusing on the right things. He went back to doing what he does best, focusing on his passion and emphasizing what makes him great. He started his own audio series where he reflected on the come up of his career, the creation of his first few projects, the navigating of the industry and the struggles that he experienced early on, and really peeling back the curtain and giving his fans a glimpse into what makes him great, into his creative process, into the elements that inspired him throughout his different album cycles, into his pitfalls, a glimpse at how he viewed himself amongst his competition as he was on the come up. And he did so in this innovative way with this whole podcast audio series rollout, where we're getting our favorite artist in their most vulnerable state, and like J. Cole said, professing their greatness, which might fail to hit you because it's not all about the bells and whistles. It most definitely wasn't about the bells and whistles. It was about the essence of what made him great, detailing his passion, detailing the creative sources that led him to create his greatest projects. He revived the blog era by starting his own blog, bringing his fans back to how they were introduced to him, and just creating the music that feels, again, authentic to him, creating the projects, the podcasts, the dialogue that feels authentic to him, and focusing back on his passion and on his fans and on his right path. And I think that's what's always going to make J. Cole great. Forget the big three talk. Forget the neck in the noose, reviving a sport that's dying talk. When he was doing all that, and you can make the case for him being, the biggest and best rapper alive, you could also make the simultaneous argument that that was when hip-hop was at its lowest point. I think if J. Cole really wants his greatness recognized, it's not going to come from the bells and whistles. It's not going to come from him constantly trying to profess that he's the greatest of all time. It's going to come from him simply putting his passion on display and keeping that tunnel vision, staying focused on authenticity and sharpening his craft. And I think we're getting that on his latest release. He put out a song on his new blog called Clouds, and yeah, he's still talking that talk about, catching murder charges, turning, artists into martyrs. But even with that, we're getting new flows from Cole, some of the most exciting flows I think we've heard from him in his entire career, and some really impactful subject matter in terms of what's going on today. Rapping about how trauma and suffering is propped up by the media, rapping the over-dramatized, the traumatized with sickness, thrown in the pan and caramelized for richness and served on a plate with sirloin steak, to billionaires who don't care the world's gonna break. As long as they make money off it, pain brings profit. One man gains it soon as the next man lost it, emphasizing the corporate greed within America and how that could disconnect you from God, disconnect you from humanity. He emphasizes he's not defined by his fortune, and he gives all glory to God for the improvements he's able to make as an artist and as a human, motivating his audience, rapping, "The gray hairs that grow on my head will show, and no time limit to get it. You're never too old, so keep hold of your dreams no matter how it seems. If you don't water your lawn, it won't stay green." Rapping about the rise of cell phone addictions and how AI and the internet is kind of replacing roles within society, comparing how we're renting everything through streaming services today to renting real estate instead of actually owning it. Ending the verse off, rapping, "As all of our favorite artists are erased by AI and scream from the wayside, whatever happened to human beings?" Really separating himself here from the corporate giants, the greedy billionaires, the social media servants, the disingenuous acts of capitalizing off manufactured trauma, not owning your own life, being in control of your own destiny by getting lost in the phone screen, getting lost in the internet age. He's emphasizing remaining human, maintaining your connection to God, owning your story, owning your struggles, watering the grass to perfect your craft, emphasizing you're, always a work in progress. And I think that sums up J. Cole perfectly, right? He's at his best when he's tapped into Jermaine the human, not J. Cole the artist, not fixated on his footing within the big three or when he's at in his prime. Instead, just staying on his path, treating his craft like a sport, and using his passion to improve himself day by day. In the end, that's what's going to make him great. That's what people are going to remember him for. He had no problem attacking some of his favorite artists when it came from a place of genuine authenticity. He came at Kanye a lot more ruthlessly than he ever went at Kendrick. But that's what it is with J. Cole, right? He's always at his best when he moves from a place of authenticity. That brings him this clarity within his messaging and his subject matter in his music that we can't get from any other artist but J. Cole. He might not be able to weave social commentary into these conceptual think piece projects like Kendrick does, and he might not be able to rack up more number ones than Michael Jackson like Drake can, but he can connect to his core base as well, if not better than any other artist, by strictly failing to compromise and moving from a place of passion, integrity, and authenticity. That's where J. Cole's greatness has and will always lie.